Well, Kirsty Anderson met the Queen in Alnwick, Northumberland, in June 2011. After an hour and a half wait, the Queen finally arrived and stopped to speak with Kirsty and her friends. And Kirsty said afterwards, "We'd been told that if the Queen says hello to you, we should say, 'Hello, Your Majesty.' But as soon as she said hello to us, we all replied, 'Hiya,' in a really high-pitched voice." And it wasn't quite right, was it? They didn't get it quite right, because there's a proper and a respectful way to greet the Queen. But instead, Kirsty and her friends sounded like they were greeting a friend that they just bumped into at the shops. Yeah, and in fact, there's quite a clear procedure for when one meets the Queen. There's lots of do's and don'ts. Things like, do stand up when the Queen comes into the room. Don't introduce yourself. Wait for the Queen wait to be introduced to her, sorry. Do take her hand if she offers to shake it. But don't grasp too tightly or shake too vigorously. And do refer to the Queen as Your Majesty the first time you address her. And after that, you can call her ma'am. Yeah, they're simple things, but it's important to get them right because you're meeting the Queen. She's a special person, an important person, a person with power and a really unique position. And so it's important to make sure you get these small things right. Get your attitude right, that you treat her a certain way. The Queen is someone who deserves a certain respect and reverence because of who she is. And this morning we're in chapter 4 of 1 Samuel, and what we see that this is what it's like for God's people. It's because of who God is, it's really important for them to get their attitude towards God right, that they treat him a certain way. And so the question we're asking this morning is this: what is the right attitude to have towards God? And how do we, as Christians, get it right? Well, in the first 3 chapters of 1 Samuel, which we looked at last week, we saw that God is a God who rescues. He rescues the rebellious Israel through Samuel, and he rescues us through Jesus. But as we get into this next section, we're going to see that even though God has rescued Israel, restore their relationship with him, that they still don't have the right attitude towards him. And as we look at these chapters, they're going to help us to see what the right attitude towards God is, what it does and doesn't look like. Well, I wonder if you've ever had something really special, something that you needed to look after really carefully because it's so valuable. I've got a wedding ring and I need to look after it. If I don't, there's a good chance when I get home I'm going to have some explaining and apologising to do to my wife. But my ring's special. It's something that's really valuable because it's a reminder of the commitment that Deanne and I made to each other 6 years ago. And so I do my best to treat it properly and look after it. And here in chapters 4 to 6 of 1 Samuel, Israel has something really special. It's called the Ark of the Covenant. It's a symbol of the covenant between God and Israel. But what we keep seeing in these chapters is that Israel don't look after it. On one level, the ark's just a gold overlaid wooden box that the Israelites, they carry around with them. But to say that the ark's just a wooden box is like saying my wedding ring is just a bit of metal. Because the ark is the visible sign of God's presence with Israel on earth. In our passage in chapter 4, verse 4, we see the leaders of Israel know that. They call the ark the throne of God. It was a physical representation of God's presence with them as their king, the sign of his rule over them. And so God wants Israel to have the right attitude towards it, to treat it the way they treat him as king. They're not to touch it, they're not allowed to look inside it, and if they do, they'll die. How they treat the ark is a symbol of how they treat God. So let's take a bit of a look at how they go with that. And as we start that, it's time for another movie review. If you're here last week, I gave a pretty bad rap to the New Year's Eve, but this time I'm reviewing The Ides of March. I watched this a little while back with my wife Deanne, and it's all about politics in America. It's not something I ever thought I would watch a movie about, let alone enjoy. It wasn't a bad movie. Although you could argue that it is a bad movie because it's about more than just politics. The heart of the movie is all about manipulation. Stephen Myers, the guy on the left of the picture there, is the PR guy for the presidential election campaign. The governor's running for president, And Myers is the master of manipulating words to make the governor look good. There's corruption and spin and manipulation everywhere you look in the movie. There's a senator using his support as leverage to get a top White House job. And Myers himself, he blackmails the governor to get promoted to campaign manager by threatening to expose a scandal that will derail the campaign for sure. For everyone in the movie, manipulation is the key to success, to get what you want. And they don't even think twice about it. And that's Israel, doing their best to manipulate God into doing what they want. They think that that's the key to success. Have a look at it with me from verse 2 to 4 in chapter 4. The Philistines deployed their forces to meet Israel, and as the battle spread, Israel was defeated by the Philistines, who killed about 4,000 of them on the battlefield. When the soldiers returned to the camp, the elders of Israel asked, "Why did the Lord bring defeat upon us today before the Philistines? Let's bring the ark of the Lord's covenant from Shiloh, so that it may go with us and save us from the hand of our enemies." We're in a bit of a trouble here. Let's go switch God on. Let's go get the ark. They think they can use God like a bit of a Rottweiler on a leash to let loose on their enemies. And it's completely the wrong attitude. It's an attitude that says, we're in charge, God, not you. We'll just call you when we need you. It's a dangerous way to think. And from verses 10 to 11, we see how it works out. The Philistines fought, and the Israelites were defeated. Every man fled to his tent. The slaughter was very great. Israel lost 30,000 foot soldiers. The ark of God was captured, and Eli's two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, died. It looks like they're calling on God for their rescue. But the problem is they've forgotten that he's their king, that God's in charge and not them. So they do things their own way, and it costs them. I wonder if you ever do the same. That's easy to do, isn't it? We get our attitude towards God wrong, and we try to do things our way instead of his. We want to be in charge of life. But it only seems to last when things are going well. As soon as you get into trouble, as soon as things start looking a bit iffy, you cry out to God saying, "God, where are you? I need you to fix this now." For me, it's often a financial thing. When we're doing okay, the bank balance is looking pretty healthy, it's easy to think I'm doing a pretty good job of being in charge of life. But when the bank balance starts to drop, and I start thinking about all the bills we have to pay, the usual response is to act like I'm not in charge, like I've been trusting God the whole time, and so now it's his turn to do something to get me out of this mess. And although we might not realise it, I reckon we've all been in this sort of situation before, where we treat God as a bit of a hero for hire rather than our faithful rescuer. We want to be in charge until the going gets tough, and so we bring in the big guns. If God is king over our lives, if he's in charge, then we need to treat him that way in every area of our lives. It's not easy, and it will usually mean we need to get off the throne ourselves. Now, it might look like God and his ark have been beaten at this point, but if the Philistines are thinking that, then they're just as badly mistaken as the Israelites are. The Israelites might have thought they could push God around on a trolley to get him to do what they wanted. And the Philistines might think that they've captured Israel's God. But they've got it all totally back to front. You might have noticed Deanne and I are expecting our first child in about 4 weeks' time. And as we get closer to the birth of our child, closer to the due date, our friends and our family, they keep reminding us that we've got no idea what we're in for. Feel free to keep reminding us, that's fine. We under no illusions. Having baby in our lives is going to be a really big deal. And this is exactly what it's like for the Philistines when we catch up with them in chapter 5. Having the ark in their lives is going to be a really big deal, and they've got no idea what they're in for. Only it's not a baby in the house, it's more like a lion. Verse 2, the Philistines are carrying around the captured ark. They're carrying it back to their land, and they put it in the temple of their god, Dagon. And it seems like they're trying to make a statement about the status of their God versus the God of Israel. But what they get in the rest of the chapter is a statement from the God of Israel. And it's a statement that shows his power and puts Dagon in his place. Because the Philistines wake up the next morning and they find their god Dagon flat on his face in front of the ark of God. Not to worry, they pick up their god and they put him back on his little stand, back up in his place. But the next morning they get up again and they go in and they see that again Dagon's flat on his face in front of the ark of the Lord. And this time his head and his arms and his legs, they're all gone. They aren't attached to his body, they're broken off. And as we keep reading from verse 7, the Philistines themselves end up on the receiving end of God's judgment. He afflicts them with tumours and death and devastation. And so they try to move the ark to a different city, but when they do, the problems just continue there. Finally, they realise that the God of Israel is not to be messed around with. He's powerful both over them and their God. And so they make plans to get rid of the ark and to send it back to Israel. And when the Israelites finally do get the ark back from the Philistines, they still haven't learned their lesson. It's time for another reminder that God is a holy God. Have a look at it with me in chapter 6, verses 19 to 20. But God struck down some of the men of Beth-Shemesh, putting 70 of them to death because they had looked into the ark of the Lord. The people mourned because of the heavy blow the Lord had dealt them, and the men of Beth-Shemesh asked, "Who can stand in the presence of the Lord, this holy God? To whom will the ark go up from here?" Well, Dagon certainly can't stand in the presence of the holy God, and neither can the Israelites, and neither can you or I. God's not a God to be messed around with. He's holy. So treat him with reverence and respect. Do you get that? See, you might be tempted to think you can just front up and stand before God just as you are, just as you like. You might think it's a bit of a casual relationship, and that God's pretty easygoing. But he's not. And you can't. Which is exactly why we need Jesus. See, God's not there for our convenience, and God is blazingly holy. So if there's a right and a wrong way to treat the Queen, how much more so with God? He's a holy, powerful king, and that's got to be the thing that shapes our attitude towards him. And it really matters that we get it right. And so there's only one way to approach him, which is standing safe behind Jesus. What those guys at Beth-Shemesh got for their disrespect for God, that's what you and I would get too, if it wasn't for Jesus, who acted like a lightning rod for us already. And he stands before God for us, pure. Remember the words of those men at Beth-Shemesh? Who can stand? Who can stand in the presence of the Lord, this holy God? The answer is Jesus can. Hebrews 9 verse 24 says it clearly. For Christ did not enter a man-made sanctuary that was only a copy of the true one. He entered heaven himself, now to appear for us in God's presence. He stands there for us, on our behalf, as our high priest, interceding for us like only he can. Which is what we read again in Hebrews 7 verse 25 onwards. Therefore he, Jesus, is able to save completely those who come to God through him, because he always lives to intercede for them. Verse 26, such a high priest meets our need, one who is holy, blameless, pure, set apart from sinners, exalted above the heavens. Unlike the other high priests, he does not need to offer sacrifices day after day, first for his own sins and then for the sins of the other people. He sacrificed for their sins once for all when he offered himself. What a great reason to get our attitude right, to acknowledge our constant need for Jesus and to trust him to stand before God on our behalf. Because we can't do it ourselves. And there's no one except Jesus who can do it. You might meet people who say that they're okay with God already, that they don't need any of this Jesus stuff. They're kind of Christ-free Christians. And so they'll say things like, yeah, I believe in God, I believe in God, but I'm really not into that religious stuff, into that Jesus stuff. Yeah, but I'm a decent person, I'm a good person, so I'm sure I'll be right with God. But the trouble with that is, it's not going to work. See, it's taking God way too casually. It's like walking up to the Queen in the street and giving a bit of a friendly slap on the back and say, "How you going, Queenie?" As if she's no one special. But God's already said to us, here's what's required. Come to me through Jesus or not at all. And so we need to get our attitude towards God right. He's holy, powerful, in charge, and we're not. And so we've got no right to approach him, no right to stand before him. But in Jesus, and only in Jesus, we have someone who stands before God on our behalf, holy, blameless, pure, who brings us to God and makes us right with him.